How's everyone doing today? Gonna let that guitar fade out for a second. I did a video the other day where I was talking about the different types of mics that you can use for a YouTube video, and I compared mics that started at $20 and went all the way up to $1,000. And I got a lot of response from a lot of people, not only from liking the comparisons and sort of getting an idea of how the mics actually sounded and worked, if they were making a choice for the kind of mic they might need for making YouTube videos. But I had a lot of questions that I didn't expect, which was, you did a thing where you made them all sound better. How'd you do that? Like, well, yeah, I have videos on my channel that kind of talk about that. But today specifically, I think what people got really interested in was I took a really cheap lapel mic, a Boya BYM1 mic, lapel lavalier mic. It's the type of mic that you like you see newscasters use. It clips onto your lapel of your shirt. And they're very affordable. And I took it and I did a little processing to it, and I made it sound a lot better than it does just going into your camera or into your system. And I got a lot of responses from people going, that's the part I want to know. Teach me that part, Daniel. And I think it's important. I have talked about it before. I know these videos aren't the kind of thing that that go crazy on my channel, but sometimes information is important to the select few of you who are really interested in that, and I'm more than happy to do it. So today, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be kind of specifically talking about how to use a lavalier mic, how to get really good sound out of it, and we're going to be doing it using some free-to-use software that you can get right now. I put links down in the description to that software. I use Reaper. It's a digital audio workstation, which a lot of times you'll hear referred to as a DAW, D-A-W. It's just fancy terms for digital audio workstation. Just like there's video editing software, there's digital audio editing software, digital audio workstation. And part of what I'm going to try to do today is keep this simple for you. Audio can be a deep dive kind of thing that's a rabbit hole that you can go down into all day long. And if that's the kind of thing you really want to dive into, there's some great channels on YouTube that can really take you down that rabbit hole of really understanding a much deeper understanding of audio. My favorite being White Noise Studio, my pal Marlon. I'll put a link in the chat, and I'll make sure you guys can find him. He gets way into the software and the different VST plugins and all the things you can use to really dial up your audio. I stay a little more peripheral. I do have an audio background from being a professional musician and producer, but I like just keeping it simple. I think one of the problems on YouTube a lot of times is so many people want to tell you what you should be using, or you're doing it wrong, or no, you didn't say that right. My goal in life is always to try to make sure that you guys out there just have a basic understanding of the tools and what you can use to get your videos to look a little better, what you can use to get your audio to sound a little bit better, what you can do to get your videos to perform a little bit better. That's the whole goal, right? Keep it simple. That's all I try to do here. I try to keep it simple. So first of all, I just want to say hi to everyone who does have an interest in this. The Homekeeping channel says, yes, simple is nice. I agree. Keep it simple. Don't keep it confusing. There's my pal, Justin. Forget Doug Houston in the house, and we love Doug Houston. Jay-Z's in the house. I got two of my favorite people in the house. Good to see you guys here. Understanding Audio 101, Amy. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I think it's confusing. I think it can be... It's one of those things that you can really... There's so much to learn, and there's so much depth into the conversation that sometimes people just go, it's too much. There's no one out there who's just trying to simplify it and say, listen, hang on a second. You're just trying to use audio on a YouTube for a YouTube video and trying to figure out a way to improve the things you have without taking, a 4-year college course on learning audio processing. And that's hopefully what we'll start today. Simple is what I need. I hear you, Tish. Simple. I need simple. Simplification is a good thing. Good morning. Doreen's Foods Prep Resource. Good to see you, my friend. Good morning to you, Doreen. So there's Doug. He's got my lapel holding it like I'm Brian Trahan. That's the joke. That's the joke. There's a new trend right now where people are, like a lot of YouTube content creators have seen other content creators grab a lapel mic and hold it in their hand. And I've been mocking them endlessly for doing that. There's a reason they call it a lapel mic, because it's supposed to attach to your lapel, and it works really good when you do that. But a lot of times I think that's one of the reasons people do that. They don't know how to use the mic properly or process it. So to try to get it to sound better, they lean on the proximity effect, which is very often a mic will sound a little bit better the closer it is to your mouth. This is a perfect example. This is the Shure SM7B. When I'm away from this mic back here, doesn't sound very good. It gets real echoey. You start picking up. It feels distant. And then when you get closer to it, it starts getting full and it starts getting rich. So I think what people do is that lapel mic, even though it's already close to your mouth, they try to get closer. Like, just they'll be eating it next. That'll be the next step. Everyone's stuffing microphones down their throat. Hopefully not. See, I said that. Now people will start doing it. Developing a speaking voice is important as well. That's so true, Eric. I have a whole video that's on my channel about how to sound like a pro YouTuber that really is all about thinking about, once you get the mic dialed in, learning the techniques to be confident, making sure that you understand what you should be paying attention to. So I'll probably link that one in here too at the end. So here, let's start real simple. Like Jessica says, I have a lapel mic, bought it years ago, and it wouldn't work with the phone I had, but for some reason I kept it. Now I know why. Okay, so here, let's start right there. There are a lot of different types of lapel mics. They call it lapel or lavalier, and it's just, let me see, I'll grab a simple one. The basic version of a lapel or lavalier mic is just a small capsule mic. Got a bunch right here. And they look something like this. They're just a cord, and they have a tiny little, this is the mic part right there, right? And a little clip, so it can clip onto like your shirt. You can just go in there, clip it in there. It's right there. It's right underneath your mouth. It works great. And the other end is usually what they call usually they start with a TRRS. Let me see that. Can you see this end right there? See how it has 3 black rings? What you're thinking about is the spaces in between. The very tip of that is the tip. That's the tip. That's why they say TRRS, tip. Then in between the first 2 black lines is one of the rings. In between the second 2 black lines is another ring. And then this bottom part here near the base is called the sleeve. So that's a TRRS, which works great with mobile devices. The reason it has an extra ring in here is because on mobile devices, you also need to, a lot of times, it's using speaker and microphone at the same time. Like when you're talking to your phone, you're hearing and you're speaking. So you need that extra connection point for it to be a TRRS, tip, ring, sleeve. Now if you're going to plug it into like a camera, you need an adapter that turns it into, let me see if I can get this up here. See if you can see this. Can you see that one now has only 2 black lines as opposed to the 3 black lines in the other one? Let me see if I can get them both up here. Let me do that. So the adapter below it here, you would plug this in, and that would allow you to plug this into like a DSLR or mirrorless camera. If you don't have an adapter on there like that, you'll find that the audio doesn't work right. That's in the camera situation. It's like, why isn't it working right? It's like, because you have to have the adapter, because cameras typically are just microphone in, right? It's the microphone in point, not microphone and speaker back out like a phone is. So in general, that's the difference. Make sure you're using the right adapter. But what Jessica said is she tried it with the phone she had, but it wouldn't work. I'm willing to bet, and I can be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'm willing to be wrong again, that you have an Android phone. One of the things that you have to understand is that a lot of the reason when new products get tested on, like even new YouTube features, they'll release them and it's like, oh, why does iPhone get the feature first? I want that new mobile feature from YouTube on my Android phone. Well, the problem with Android phones is there's one platform, Android, that's owned by Motorola, but they license it out to a bunch of different manufacturers. So all these different companies are out there, Samsung and Nokia still around, and Huawei, and all these different companies are licensing the operating system, but then modifying the functionality of the phone. So every phone is different. Every Android phone operates differently. So one, you can plug a mic into, it'll work fine. Another one you plug it into, won't work at all. Now, on an iPhone, it's one platform, one manufacturer. So if it works on one iPhone, it technically should work on every iPhone. So that's why a lot of people will test software on iPhones first. But the same is true with microphones. What you want to think of is, if it doesn't natively work, it could be your phone, or it could be that you need a third-party software integration like there's a lot of different ones. Even things like Filmic Pro can sometimes help out. A lot of different apps that can allow you to then plug a microphone in. So if you plug a lapel microphone into your phone, it doesn't work. First of all, make sure you have the right type of adapter. Make sure it's a TRRS, not a TRS. Make sure that it's connecting properly. And then make sure if your phone doesn't support that, you might need a third-party software. And some phones in general, some of the older ones, don't support microphone imports or inputs at all. So it's tricky. You just have to be aware of it. And the other thing is, this is another thing you want to think of. This particular one is just a regular lapel mic. It's unpowered. It has no power to it. So what you want to do is make sure you have a microphone. This isn't the Boya by bleh. This isn't the Boya BYM one I was talking about. This is a really cheap one. This is like a $9 lapel mic that I use in a different sense. The Boya BYM one actually has a little capsule in it that what it allows it to do, it has a battery in it. So that is the preamplification that allows it to power the mic. One thing people forget is that microphones need power. Now, if you're using a computer, you might be used to using like a USB microphone that just has plugs into your USB port. And as you know from anything with a USB, that's a power supply. So a lot of times the USB mics will be powered from your computer or system. These kind of mics don't run any power through these, specifically through like a headphone jack. So a lot of times you have to add the power in. So that's one of the things you want to think about. The reason I recommend the Boya, which I did link down below, has its own capsule in line that has a battery in it, and it provides that power for both situations of a phone and or a camera. And it switches on and off depending on the application because not all devices need that power. So that's a pretty cool thing. I definitely would recommend it. It's like it starts at about $15 to $20. If you want to buy it with a couple extra features and clips and things, it can go up to like $25. Super affordable. Okay, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. What we're talking about here is trying to get that audio to sound better. Now, I've got some links down below for the software I'm going to be using today because I'm going to be showing you some software that I've talked about before. I use a digital audio workstation called Reaper. And here's the deal. It's not a free software. It is a paid software that's about $60, but they have a limitless free trial until you're satisfied with it, which is something I've never heard of any software company doing. You could literally go, you know, I'm trying it out, I'm using it for a year, and if I find a year later I'm way into it, they don't suggest that. They say like, hey, if you use it for like 30 or 60 days and you love it, pay for it. But it's one of those things, like sometimes I'll download a software and I'll use it once and I won't get back to it till, 2 months later, and the free trial is already up. This one they have like it'll keep having a pop-up saying, I'm still using the evaluation. It doesn't limit any of the features. It doesn't add any tones. It's completely 100% functional, and I've linked it down below. And then when you're ready to buy, I do suggest if you use it a lot, it's like $60. It's super affordable, and it's a full digital audio workstation. It is like the last thing that you'll ever need when it comes to processing audio. So if you like it, absolutely please throw money towards the guys who are building the software because it's really great and super affordable. But like I said, everything I'm showing you today, you can download today, start using, no limitations, maybe other than a few pop-ups while you're getting through the process. So this is, let me see if I can do this here. Let me add this up here. This is the software. Let me get my face out of here for a second. Let me give you full screen, and I'll even lose the, let me lose the taskbar so you don't have to stare at my icons down below. Let me hide that. Okay, so here is that. I'll even turn off. Let me turn off my overlay. We know I'm live. Enough with that. So this is Reaper. If none of you have ever used a digital audio software before, it's not much different than a video editing software where you have tracks. I have one track created right here. This is the control, and there's the track up above. So if I click on that, you'll see the audio waves. This is actually what the piece that I recorded for my last video. And this is, you can edit. You can do all the things you normally would do is cut pieces, put them together, crossfade, all those things. It does all the wonderful things that you want your audio to do. And now down below are the individual tracks. Think of it like, have any of you guys ever seen what a mixing console looks like in a recording studio? It's like these huge boards with all these faders and all these knobs, and you're like, man, you must have to be a genius to operate that thing. Well, what people don't really tell you oftentimes is it's all redundant. There really is only like one main track, right? Like if you look down here, like see where my mouse is pointing, right down here. There's one track. That's track one. This is your master over here. That's just everything goes into the master. And then you have individual tracks, right? And every time you add a track, it's the exact same thing. So on these big mixing boards, you might see a big 24 or 48 track board. And all they are is every track is identical. It's just handling a different signal, different piece of audio. Maybe it's handling, you know, if you're singing a bunch of parts on a song, it might have all the different harmonies, but they're identical. And in this case, and I have a video where I really got in depth on how to download this, how to install it, how to make sure it works right, and I'll make sure I post that in the description so you don't have to waste time here. But the links are there. You can start downloading it right now. Whenever you want to add a track, you can right-click in any of these gray areas and say, Insert New Track, and there's a new track. And then you can grab them and move them in any order. Like I got 2, so I can just left-click, drag. And all it is I'm just adding tracks. And every time I add a track up here, you'll notice the controls down below show up as well. So it's sort of redundancy. What you're seeing up top is the tracks. What you're seeing down below here in the lower section is the deeper controls of that track. So at any one of these that I click on up top, you'll notice it lights up down below. So I'm on that track that has audio. That's track 1. If I click on the second one, then down below the second one lights up. That's kind of it. It's pretty simple. It just means it's an audio, just like in your video editing software. This is your audio editing software. And when you have a track illuminated, the same thing like editing video, you have a playhead. There's a playhead right there. We can take that and we can illuminate that track by clicking on it. And then we can say, oh, what if I wanted to bring audio in? It's a simple matter of clicking on Insert, Media File, and then finding that audio track that you wanted to bring in. Let's see, I must have something kicking around here that I can bring in. I won't waste too much time, but I already got one in. Let's try this one right here. I'll bring that here. And there, see, I just clicked, and it inserted it because I had that track highlighted, ready to go, and there's that audio track. So the more I add, the bigger this will start getting. If I keep adding tracks, if I'm dealing with multiple tracks, it keeps getting bigger and bigger, but it's just redundancy. It's just individual tracks. And then you're mixing how all those tracks work together. You can mute them, you can solo them, meaning like, okay, I don't want to hear any of these other tracks. I can click on the M, so I'll only hear the top track. This is what it is. In its basic form, it's just like editing video with a bunch of different video sections or audio sections, but this is a digital audio workstation. It just does audio. So let me delete these other ones because I don't need them. Let me get those out of here. Yes, let's delete that track. So here was a piece of audio that I used my Boya BY M1 to record. Let me see if you can hear this okay. And it's just flat, completely flat. I haven't added anything to it. And this is what it sounds like. Let's make sure that's on. Right now you're listening to the Boya BY M1 lavalier lapel mic directly into my system. It tends to have less bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size, but it also does a really good job of capturing your voice because it's right up close to your mouth and somewhat discreet in shot. You can even hide the wire down inside of your shirt. Okay, so that's what the mic sounds like, just plugging it right into my system and letting it just run. Like I haven't done anything to it. And I think this is where a lot of people get confused as they go, you know, I don't like that mic. It doesn't sound good. I think what a lot of creators forget is that mics in general tend to be flat. They don't want to add a lot of what we call coloration, meaning they don't want to add too much bass or add too much treble artificially. They're trying to capture natural acoustics and not color or change the sound too much. Just capture it, and they leave it to you to then take that and add that, you know, the color you want to it. Just like you would on a piece of video that you capture. You might film yourself, and then you go into your video editing software and you say, well, I'm going to, you know, I want to bring up the brightness. I want to improve the color. I want to change the clarity. I might use a LUT. I might do all kinds of things to make it look cooler. Same is true with your microphones. They stay very flat, and it's your job afterwards to go in and make them sound a little bit better the way you want based on the application that you're doing. So let me play that same thing, and if you watch right down here, I have an effects chain right here. I'm going to click that effects chain on, and let me see if you can hear the difference. Right, I'll just let it play, and then I'll click it on, and then you'll hear the difference of it being flat versus processed. Right now you're listening to the Boya BY M1 lavalier lapel mic directly into my system.
And let's click on the processing here. It tends
to have less bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size, but it also does a really good job of capturing your voice because it's right up close to your mouth and somewhat discreet in shot. You can even hide the wire down inside of your shirt. Right now you're listening to this microphone directly into my system, so it sounds a little bit flat. But with a little bit of EQ and compression, it actually cleans up to a fairly...
Can you hear the difference? And it's just it's a $20 mic, but it was just the ability to
sort of change things. And that may not be everyone's style. I'm going to get 9 million, professional audio guys go, I wouldn't have used that much compression, or I wouldn't have used that much EQ or whatever. I tend to mix for mobile, because I think mobile is one of those things that sometimes people listen with headphones, sometimes they listen right from the phone. And I want it to be kind of smooth and round and rich, so that someone who watches from their mobile device gets a pretty good experience. But I also want people who have headphones on and they might be listening from a desktop. That should be reasonably rich. Now, these mics aren't perfect. You can definitely, they have a multi-directional pattern, meaning they're grabbing those little lapel mics. These are grabbing audio from all directions, which is a great thing for you when you're doing your audio for your vocal, because it's not like, oh, it's not aimed the right way. Whereas this one, that mic gets aimed the wrong way. It's like, oh, all hell breaks loose. Now I don't sound good. It has to be like right next to my mouth, but I don't want to have plosives into it. So I have to make sure that I'm like kind of going past it. These are designed that they'll pick up a really good audio, even if they're like angled to the side or up or down a little bit. So they don't have to be perfectly aimed at your face. I usually just clip them on and they start to sound good. One thing that people have problems with these is they sometimes get close rustling noise. What I suggest is there's two ways to do this. Take the clip right off of here, and then you can either tape it to your chest and tape the wire, or one of my buddies who has a channel, who's in our battalion member, he likes to tape his to the inside of his shirt. He goes inside out and tapes to the shirt, because once you stop it from moving, if it's secured, you lose all that rustling noise, which is great. And they're very good at noise cancellation in general, except when you grab the wires and move them around, they can be noisy. So let's talk about what I did to improve this sound. First of all, right while we're here, have I lost anybody yet? Is anybody understanding what's going on? There's Blaine. Blaine, thanks for the super chat, pal. Good morning to my EF Hutton. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and helping us strengthen our YouTube audio. Hey, pal, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the super chat. And I hope some of this is useful. I don't know what Blaine's using for microphones, but he's so professional. He's probably got all kinds of crazy equipment. That guy's, he's a machine. He's a machine. With you so far. Cool. Jessica, I appreciate that. I'm just looking at some are omni, some are unidirectional. Not usually. Most of the and if you might be referring to different mics. Most of the lapel mics are not unidirectional. They're omnidirectional. They're actually called a condenser mic, and 99.9% of them are condenser mics, which means they're going to grab all of the sound around you and pull them in. Things like a shotgun mic are more unidirectional. If you don't know what a shotgun mic is, up here I use this. This is the Sennheiser I used in my video. Very long tubular. You'll see those sometimes mounted on top of cameras, and they're unidirectional. They'll go very directional. But the vast majority of the lapel mics are going to be they're going to grab as much as they can. They're not going to be unidirectional. They're going to be a condenser and grab everything. Let's see what we got going on here. I'm just making sure I grab this. Excellent point about fixing for mobile. Yeah, it's one of those things, it's funny. I did my video the other day, and after I did it, a guy came on. Everyone was like, wow, that sounds really great. It worked out great. And I had one guy say to me, yeah, your audio sounded terrible. It was way too trebly, and it was distorted, and I hated it. And that's one of the things I'll talk about more about what you're listening through. What you're monitoring your audio through is going to be really important, but I'll dive into that in a minute. I really want to talk about the mic and what we've been doing here to improve the sound. But there will be, what you're listening through makes all the difference. And it'll be important to cover that as well. So let's start here. What I did here, let me pull up this whole thing. I'm going to pull up the effects chain for this. Let me see if I can get on this and you can see what I'm using. Again, these are all free effects. In this particular software, what you can do, let me close this out. I'll just add a new channel to show you what I'm talking about. If I open up this, right above the channel, there's this little spot that says FX. When it has an on-off button that turns it on and off, right now there's nothing selected, so it pulls up the, hey, you got to add something, silly. But if I do this and I click, let me make sure I got this all over here so that it's doing what it should. Can you guys see okay? Hopefully, yes, you can see it good. There's nothing in here. And what you want to do is you'll have add an effect. You can add an effect here. You can click the add button, and it'll open up another window, which is probably on my other, yeah, here it is. Let me bring it over. It gives you an effects menu. I'm running two screens. It went to the other screen. And here's all the different VST plugins. Some are EQs, some are compression, some are different things. And it allows you to add these things in one at a time. You can say, oh, I want to add the Baxter EQ. Click, add, and now that is added in to this chain. So I've now added to this track. Oh, I put an EQ in, and this is here's the actual EQ that I added. So there's different things you can do. That's basically what we're going to be talking about, is getting your audio in and then adding effects. These are called VST effects. They're digital sound processing effects that allow you to improve the quality of your audio. There's different ones. You guys are probably used to seeing things like, you probably know some that are like reverb or EQ. You probably, some of those things you've heard before, or delay, to make your vocal delay. But we're going to be using some ones that you may be less familiar with. The two main things that you need to pay attention to when you're working on audio is EQ and compression, okay? I think a lot of you know what EQ is. It's your equalizer. It's the ability to adjust the low frequencies, the mid frequencies, and the high frequencies of your audio. But compression is something that people don't always understand. Compression is the ability to take a signal that might be peaking and getting lower and sort of squashing it down so that the quieter parts get a little louder. It's not that it makes them louder, it brings up the level automatically. And then the louder parts, it pushes them down a little. So it compresses them. So when you're hearing something that's louder and softer, it kind of squashes it down, the bottom up and the top down, to keep it a little more linear. Have you guys ever had that problem, like when you're watching a TV show and a commercial comes on and it's 16 times louder than the the program was, or the movie, and you're grabbing the remote like, oh my God, that's like so much louder. That's a compression problem, where one signal is softer, one is louder, and they're just jumping all over the place. One of the things that compression does is it brings up those quieter parts to make them a little more in your face, almost like riding that volume knob, the fader. And then the louder parts, it'll push them down a little bit. That's one type of compression. Another type of compression is called a limiter. And a limiter only deals with the ceilings. So if your audio is pretty well compressed, but sometimes it's, you want to try to get the ceiling, so you bring it like it can't go past a certain point. I don't ever want it to peak past here, and I want to push up that volume and get a maximized sound, but try to control the very top of the ceiling, how high it'll get. That's a limiter. And it's using the same compressor in a different way. Not something you need to get super technical on, but you should understand the idea that compression and limiting is really important to controlling your vocal. So in this case, let me get rid of this other, I don't need this other track. Let me open up the effects chain for this vocal. Now here's the effects chain. It happens to be selecting this one. The first thing I put in, let me turn, these are just activating each little thing I've added here. The first thing I'm adding, let me bring it over so you can see it, is an EQ that's free. I have the link down below. It's called the Boot EQ. It's from Variety of Sound. And there's different types of EQs. I think a lot of you guys are used to graphic EQs that are like sliders that go up and down. There's a whole line of sliders and you go up and down with them. And there's also parametric EQs. This is more of that style, where what it does is, instead of giving you little faders, in that EQ curve, it'll grab a section and say, well, let's take the whole curve of like the middle. And do you want that whole curve to go up more, or do you want to flatten it down and subtract? So it's sort of doing a nice soft curve, because you never really want to pull individual frequencies out, because it starts sounding unnatural. It's about trying to create a natural curve to things. And the way these basically work, if you're looking at this EQ, is there's your high, which doesn't have a curve. Here's your low. And what it's doing here is this is controlling where the peak of that curve is. And this is controlling where the peak of the curve is right here. And this is controlling whether I'm subtracting or adding to it. So I'm dipping it a little bit right around. These are the mid-highs. So high, mid-low, low. And that's all you're going to do, is start trying to find what you're going to add and subtract in your EQ using curves instead of faders. Now, if I said a graphic EQ would look like this one. This is one, it's turned up sideways. Sometimes they're flat. But this is probably what you may be used to, is something that's a graphic EQ that has individual frequencies, right? So it's you're lifting one frequency up or one frequency down. But even when you use these, you want to try to use them as a curve. In this case, they do it stacked. But basically, this is low and this goes up to high. The reason, if you say like, why do you have that one frequency pulled completely out, Daniel? It's because it's 80 Hertz dB. It's a super low subsonic frequency. And in things like a microphone, if you have a plosive where it's like, and it like gives a big popping kind of woofing sound, or sometimes wind noise when you hear the wind hitting the mic and it's like rumble, 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 like. The way to remove some of that is to remove those really low frequencies that are making that rumbling sound, because they're not natural to your voice to begin with, right? Your voice tends to occupy sort of like a maybe 100, 120 up to, maybe 10 or 12K frequency, almost like a rainbow. Like most of the middle frequencies are louder in your vocal tone, and the lowers and the super highs usually roll off. So we're trying to create a nice EQ curve. So you can do that with a graphic EQ. You can do that with a parametric EQ. And you can stack them. I use these things together because I'll start dialing something in and I'll notice a couple of things that maybe one EQ wasn't really effectively doing. Like I say, like I'll get a nice round sound out of a parametric EQ, and then I'll go, let me grab a graphic one and just do a couple tweaks to it because it's close, but it's not quite there. Another tool that I'm using in here is the compressor that I told you about. Let me pull that over. Here's the compressor. This is another one by Variety of Sound. It's called Density. And you can set it. If you look in the lower right here, let me get bigger so you can just see this a little bit better. And I'll show you, I know I'm kind of running through this, but I'll show you exactly how these things work. I have it set for compression, the lowest toggle in the lower right. I have it set, remember I said there's two different types of compression. There's like more of a compressor and more of a limiter. I have this one set as a compressor, and it allows me to, it's a stereo compressor. I don't need it as a stereo because it's a mono signal, but that's how they sell it. So I just link both and crank them both up. And then you're just basically controlling the amount of compression you want to put onto this, which is going to help flatten it out. I use that same thrill seeker again later on in the chain. Here it's number 2, but I use it again in the number 5 position. But if you notice, let me pull that. I'm sorry, that's thrill seeker. Density. Number 4 position, he said. I use it here, but if you notice, I've got the switch toggle down as a limiter. So what I'm actually doing here is one of them, let me see if I can open up both for you. Yeah, one of them, I'm using 2 in the same signal chain. The very first one is a compressor, and you can see the toggle in the lower right is up into the compression setting. And then the lower one, I've got it switched down to a limiter. So one's doing the thing I talked about, sort of squashing overall, bringing the quiet parts up a little, bringing the top parts down a little. And then the other one is creating a ceiling where it's like really trying to maximize it and keep it closer to a reasonable signal level throughout the whole audio chain. I'm talking a lot. Is this making sense? Is this making sense to anybody in here? Let me make sure I'm pulling some stuff up here, grabbing some question. What is the difference between Hertz and decibels? Hertz, that's a great question. Hertz is, when you talk about Hertz, basic YouTuber, YTuber, is the frequency in the spectrum. So think about on your car stereo. Okay, on your car stereo, you might go, oh, I want to turn up the treble, right? So your Hertz, your frequency range is the higher frequency, higher kilohertz, getting up higher. The lower frequency are the lower Hertz, the low frequencies. Decibels is physically the volume level. So if it was in your car stereo, decibels would be your volume knob, and then Hertz would be more like your bass and treble knobs, where you're going, it needs more of these frequencies. Does that make sense? Now we can control when we're playing with EQs, how many decibels of a certain Hertz or a certain frequency is being added, but the Hertz is really the frequency, the decibel is the volume. Hope that makes sense. There we go. DB is alive. There she is. Meg's got all the jokes today. She came in swinging. That's okay. I'm kind of following along. I found if I just stick it out, understand, well, okay, Jessica, I'll try to make sense. So all we're really understanding here, Jessica, and everybody, is 2 main features I want you to pay attention to. EQ, which is just like in your car, turning up the bass and treble, except we're using fancier EQs that let you control the mid-range, the mid-lows, the frequencies that are like, if you're looking at the audio spectrum of these are the lowest parts of your frequencies and these are the super highs, we have the ability to control everything in between and get those all working right. Right. And then the compression, which is just the ability to take things that are super loud and then super soft and go, wait a minute, I don't want the volume going all over the place. I want to squash it so it feels kind of even, so that even when something is loud, it gets squashed down a little bit. I even have some of these effects on my microphone here through my outboard gear. And then when someone's talking softer and quieter, it's softer and quieter, but it should still be, it shouldn't like drop in volume so much that you have to crank up the volume on your device to hear it. So that's what we're trying to do, trying to figure out how to compress that signal so it works quiet and soft. That's the 2 main things. You're making it easy to understand. I hope I am. Some of this stuff can get deep, and I really want to, I can go down the rabbit hole, and I don't want to go too deep. I want you guys all to be able to download this stuff, give it a try, test it out, play with it. I say the number one thing is if you start working with something, you'll go, oh, okay, I get it. when I started like twisting the knobs and I could hear what's happening, it made a lot more sense. So let's do some of that. Let's twist some knobs. There's some other things I've used in this chain, but there's one other thing I really want you to pay attention to. And that's right here is called a spectrum analyzer. Let me get over. It's the one in the bottom. When I click on spectrum analyzer here, what you'll see is when I play my audio, this spectrum analyzer, remember how I talked about the EQ curve, right? Let's say if I pulled up the EQ, here's the EQ, right? So think about your audio as like, turn this whole thing sideways. Here's the EQ, right? Here's the lows right over here. And then there's the mids and there's the high frequencies. Well, a spectrum analyzer analyzes your audio and tells you, it doesn't add or subtract anything. It tells you what it's hearing in your audio. It's telling you, this is how many lows are in this audio. Here's how many mids and here's how many highs. And it does it like a wave. That's what all those frequencies are down below you here, all the way down to the lowest 20 hertz up to 20 kilohertz. So you're seeing the spectrum. And when I play this audio, and I have this on, right? Hold on a second. Let me do this. Let me make sure I've got this activated. What you'll see is that will start showing you visually what's going on in that track for the EQ of it and compression, but you'll learn that in a minute. So let me play and I'll show you.
Right now you're listening to the Boya
Can you see this?
BYM1 lavalier lapel
So
mic
all this over here is the lows.
into my system.
Here's the mids.
It tends to have less bottom end than
Here's
some
the
of the
highs.
other mics because of the capsule size.
Right.
But it also does
And as
a
I
really
turn
good
things
job
on and
of
off,
capturing your voice because it's right up close
this
to
is
your
the-
mouth.
this is the flat
and somewhat
sound.
discreet in shot. You
And
can
it's
even
telling
hide
you
the wire
that's what the
down
mic is
inside of your
capturing.
shirt. Right now, you're listening to this microphone directly into my
now,
system. So
one
it
of the
sounds a
things you
little
want to
bit
think
flat,
about
but with a little
is
bit of
when
EQ and
you're
compression,
capturing audio, having that spectrum analyzer, and I do have a link in the description to download that. It's called VSpan. I think it's a Voxengo plugin. It's free. It's looking at that curve. It's looking at your audio and going, here's the lows, here's the highs, and here's the mids. And where that can be really helpful is sometimes your ear will hear something that's not really there. Or you'll add too much low, or you'll add too much high, and you're trying to figure out exactly what's true. And this can help dial it in. It's giving you a visual snapshot of the EQ and compression of that track. So let me show you one more time to make sure you can see what's going on. It's just showing us a snapshot of that track.
The Boya
Can you see it?
BYM1 lavalier
So
lapel
all these
mic
super lows I don't
directly into
want
my
way down
system.
here, or
It
my
tends
voice
to
would
have
sound
less
boomy.
bottom end than some of the other mics because
Here's
of
the highs,
capsule
and here's
size,
the mids.
But it also
now what I
does
can
a
tell you
really
is, see
good
where it's
job of
peaking
capturing your
mostly in
voice
here?
because it's right up close to
See
your
where that's
mouth
peaking? Let me turn
and
this down a
somewhat
little.
discreet
Can
in
you
shot.
see where
can
this is
even
mostly
hide the
peaking?
wire
Am I
down
doing the right
inside
thing,
of your
Megan? Am I
shirt.
turning down the other
Right now
audio?
you're listening to this microphone
Can you hear
directly
me?
into my system, so
No?
it sounds a little bit
Hold on,
flat.
let me get it right. How
But
about
with
this
a little
one?
bit of EQ
Does that
and
do it? Does that
compression,
turn it down?
It
I'll get it, yeah.
actually
I'll
cleans
figure
up
this
to
out,
a
yeah.
fairly rich vocal
Okay,
tone.
so what it's
This
doing
is what it
here is
sounds like
you
after
can see
compression and EQ.
there's too many lows down here. Let me get that. I turned myself down too? Dang it. I'm trying to get this right. All right. Well, I'm trying to do what I can here. Is that my work? I've never had to do this kind of mix before. I'm working on the fly here. Let me make sure I turn myself down too much. Is that better? Is that better? Am I back in the mix again? Let's see. How about that? Is this killing me? That kills me too. All right. It is what it is. I hear. Some of this is going to be overlapping. I'm sorry. I kind of did this on the fly. I have to set my system up to be able to do more of these things. But if that works, you can hear me. Check. Good. Okay. So what that's doing is you can see those frequencies. That's when that's playing. All of this is representing all these super lows, 20 to 40 to 80, those low hertz. You don't need those. Your voice doesn't really reflect those. So if those are in your signal path, that means that your mic is picking up some booming. Maybe you popped, like you said, a big P into your microphone and popped the mic. And those are the kind of things that you want to make sure you eliminate. And also those super highs, way up in the 10 to 20K, is that super sibilance when it's like, pss, pss, you hear like the S's and they're like, oh, they're kind of ripping my head off. They're a little too bright. Those are the kind of things your voice normally will create like a pattern that looks like a rainbow. It goes up in the middle and then comes back down. That vocal range for a normal human is somewhere in there. So knowing that right off the bat with a spectrum analyzer, you start to understand how you can change things. Now, if I play that clip in a loop, you can see when I turn on things like the EQs, you'll see it start to modify. When I was playing this, did you notice that it seemed a little muddy? Like those mics in general with no EQ.
Right now you're listening to
Kind of
the
flat.
Boya BYM1
It's not terrible.
lavalier lapel mic directly into my
It's just kind of flat, right? It doesn't do a whole lot right there. So one of the things when I was looking at that, I'm like, that feels really flat to me. I wish I could.
Right now, you're listening to the Boya BY.
See how a lot of these frequencies down here, the lower mids, kind of marbly and mushy.
To have less bottom end than some of the
I want a little more of this
the
high
size,
happening in here.
But it also does.
So
a
as I
really
click
good
on
job
these
of capturing your voice
EQs,
because it's right up close to your mouth and somewhat
see how those start
discreet in
popping
shot.
up here?
You can even hide the wire.
See how that flattens
down
out
inside of your shirt.
See that?
Right now, you're listening to this microphone directly into my system, so it sounds a little bit
So
flat.
what I'm doing there is I'm using the spectrum analyzer and my monitors, my speakers, to start to listen to what I'm hearing to make sure it sounds right to me, but also using the spectrum analyzer to make sure I don't bring those super highs up too much or the lows out. I'm cutting some of the lows to make sure there's no rumbling. That can happen with a lapel mic if you start like hitting it or whacking into it, you know, moving it or rustling it. And I'm trying to bring the highs up a little to bring a little more presence. But that's just EQ. And a lot of times people will stop there and go, the mic still sounds a little better, but not great. But that's where compression can really smooth things out. Adding the compressors in and adding just a bit of the ability to squash it down and bring all of those mid-tones and high tones and low tones all together can be super helpful. Let me do the same thing. I'm going to just play the same thing, and we'll turn on the compression, and we'll see if you can hear that popping in. Let me see. Let me play back over here.
Right now, you're listening to the Boya BY
Not terrible.
lavalier
Now let's bring in that first compressor.
Directly into my system. It tends to have less bottom end than some of the other
fuller.
mics because of the capsule size.
Now let's add in
the
the
limiter. It
limiter.
also does a really good job of capturing your voice because it's right up close
Feel
to
that
your
get
mouth
fuller?
and somewhat discreet in shot. You can even hide the
me
wire
turn the limiter
down
off.
inside of your shirt. Right now, you're listening to this microphone directly into my system.
Just compression,
so it sounds a little
and
bit
now a
flat.
limiter to full it
With
out.
a little bit of EQ and compression, it actually cleans up to a fairly
Now look
rich
at the
vocal
EQ
tone.
curve.
This is what it sounds like after compression and EQ.
A lot closer to that rainbow mountain, right? That started happening. Once I started adding things in, it starts compressing it and not letting certain frequencies fly out of control. It starts compressing the overall signal in there and just squashes it, right? So you're taking that stuff that some of those frequencies are spiking, then you go, whoop, let me put the compressor on it. Let me squish it down. Let me get it under control. A little limiter will control the top and we'll compress in the sides. Then we'll get it into a nice little package. And we're gonna you can EQ it as well. Now, different people have different approaches. It's like, well, you're creating what we call a signal chain. You go, well, what do I put first? The EQ, the compression, the EQ. You're gonna get different results, and there's different reasons to do each. Typically, what I do is I EQ first, and then I compress it. Because if I compress it first, it can start pushing some of the bad frequencies that I don't like in the mic. It'll start bringing them up louder. But both can work for different reasons. You can read about that theory a lot. But typically, I'll EQ and then compression, and then I'll work from there. Those are the very basics: EQ, compression, and then limiter. Same compressor, just turned on a limiter setting to kind of put a ceiling on it and really like maximize it and stop it from going. It sort of brings everything to a nice ceiling height. Does that make sense so far? I know a lot of this can be tricky, but that's that same lavalier mic. Let me see. Compression is literally controls all the sound and smush it to make it better. That's a pretty true statement, my man. That's basically what you're doing. Is compression is just taking like the combination of the frequencies and the decibels and sort of going whoop, let's put a leash on all of them, and let's make sure that it kind of everything that's super quiet, let's bring it up a little. Anything that's super loud, let's bring it down a little. And there's different types of compression, hard knee, soft knee, but I won't go into that too much. Just understand that compression is doing that. It's bringing it together, sort of controlling things from getting too out of control. Yeah, it made it sound so good. Thanks. Yeah, see, can you hear that, Jessica? It just slightly modifies that tone so that you can bring that around. Here's a great question. Any advice for female voices so we can get richest without sounding like a linebacker? One of the things that female voices, because they sit in a slightly higher register, meaning most females do not have as many low frequencies as men do. That's not a good or a bad thing. It's just true. One of the things that it becomes problematic with women is when you start compressing things and working them out and EQing them. Women will have, because they have less lower frequencies, which you can slowly boost up. You just roll some of those up, just some of the mid lows, not the super lows, just the mid lows, get a little fuller tone. But one of the things you can do is subtractive EQ. Watch out for the highs. What happens a lot, I'll hear this like female broadcasters, they'll be on the air and they'll have what they call sibilance problems, meaning they start compressing them and EQing them. And what happens is the highs get really out of control. I've seen more female announcers where they do a bad audio mix. There was actually one of the people who was a female who was doing some of the YouTube instructional videos recently for their official channel, and she would like anytime she said an S or a T, or it would just, or an F, it would go right through me. It was like a razor blade. There's a specific tool that I want to show you for that too. Let me show you. This one's really helpful for men and for women. If you start EQing and compressing and you notice that like it sounds pretty good, but then like the S's and the F's and the higher like the sibilance notes or the T's might get, they're too harsh. One of the things you can add is literally, it's a great name for a tool. If the S's are too strong, you use a de-esser. It removes the SE sounds, and it only attacks based on certain frequencies. This is a really cool one. Let me show you this. So I have one of those in this signal chain. And again, we're just stacking VST plugins or effects that we need along the line. I don't have it on right now, but this is the de-esser right here. And what this basically does, I know it's got a lot of slidey knobs on it. And you're like, well, what does all that do, Daniel? That seems incredibly confusing. But let me show you. Basically, it decides if you're processing mono or stereo. My signal's mono. I don't need stereo. Target type is either high pass or low pass, meaning or band pass. It just means which ends of the spectrum you're trying to control. There's monitoring and stuff, but what it comes down to is the frequency. And for females, usually once you get above in that band range, let's go back to the EQ. Remember we talked about this graphic EQ? Once you get past like 3, 5, 7, these super high frequencies, 10, 12, down below, those are the ones that are the super high sibilance ones. So in a de-esser, you can say, well, let me set the frequency that I want to control. Let me set the ceiling. Anything above, and for me, I've got it set for about 84, 85. So it's like on an EQ, that would be, maybe somewhere right in here, right where we start getting into that between 7 and 10, those super high sibilance notes. That's where I've got it set. And then it's just got the threshold and the ratio, how much you want to add to it. And if you notice, I'll play this. I've got it turned on. Anytime I hit, even though it sounds good, if I turn this on, you'll watch this start to activate. You'll see like a little purple line coming in. And every time it's hitting like a really harsh note, this is telling it to remove that frequency, dial that frequency back. Don't let it spike and hiss. So if I'm playing this
right now, you're listening to the Boya BY-M1 lavalier lapel mic,
and I can
directly into my
threshold.
system.
See on the
It
bottom?
tends to have less bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size, but it also does a really good job of capturing your voice.
Can you see this? Look at the very bottom black bar where it says dB, -3, -6, and that's how much of that super high frequency when my voice peaks and it sounds good, but it's a little too crispy, it's a little too crinkly on the top, you're hearing too much of the clickety clicks and the S's. The de-esser is going to pull that back. So that's all.
Right now, you're listening to the Boya BY-M1 lavalier lapel mic directly into my system.
And take more of it out.
It tends to have less bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size.
So I can increase the ratio of how much it's going to drop it back, and then the threshold. I can say like, well, how strong is signal before it starts pulling that, and
right now you're listening to the Boya BY-M1 lavalier lapel mic directly into my system. It tends to have less bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size.
So that de-esser right there, if you can hear that at all, that's a great one for women, because you will find that you get these very high sibilance notes for certain women, and it's really good for, sometimes people have a little bit of a lisp. And if you're like someone who has a bit of a lisp, and I have a little bit of a lisp, and it'll pull out for me like on things like an F or an S. And that'll make a weird, it'll carry too much. So it's a great way to pull that back a bit, just by adding a little de-esser. It takes away the accentuation of those notes. So that's a great one for females. Great for men too. It's a great one when you get this, it sounds perfect, but it's a little too much of the high end. And then when I take the EQ out, it solves the S problem, but then it sounds kind of dull. So a combination of the two is getting the overall mix right and then putting in a de-esser just to stop any of those high frequency spikes. Great one in there. Let me see how we doing here. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Kathy. How you doing, pal? So it softens the sound, basically. Yeah, it softens the top end. It softens the high frequency spikes, the de-esser. Really, really good for that. And I got to tell you, everything in here, these de-essers and stuff, these all come built into Reaper. So those are all there, and some of the other ones I've been showing you, like the more kind of fancy, anything that looks like the basic graphics like this is a Reaper plugin, and anything that looks a little fancier like the boot, this one here that has, it's got colors, it's like cooler knobs. These are all external VSTs, free downloads that you download, you install, and you can use them with this software. VST plugins are very useful. They work with a lot of different video editing software that allow VSTs and audio software that carry VST plugins too. So that's basically what we're looking at. Yeah, that's what it does. It softens it. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. Let's see. Would that help with a strong accent? No, that's not like an accent remover. It's not like, hey, suddenly I turned a knob and I went from a strong Irish accent to I sound like Marlon Brando. I sound like the famous actor. Doesn't get rid of accents, but what it gets rid of. We're talking about frequency and decibels. That's all it is. So it's not going to clear. You can clear up the tonality of your voice, because I think some microphones, when they don't sound clear, they it's harder to understand somebody when the audio isn't crisp. But it's not going to change your accent, unfortunately. I wish it did. Like, hit a button and it's like, hey, look at that. I'd make myself sound like James Earl Jones. Everything would be like, I am your father. It would be awesome. Or I'd go for what's his name? Megan. Who's the guy who does all the history channels? I can't remember his name. The Penguin March? No, I can't remember his name. I'd have a great voice. Let me see. I'm just trying to let me see. Great information. Yeah, I hate when the S comes out. It's piercing. Yeah, exactly. So that's a great way to handle that, is EQ, compression, and de-esser. Really, really powerful ways to do that. There's another thing too. What's going on, my friend? Bad Wolf Gamers. Good to see you. One of the things you want to think about is sometimes the noise that happens in and out. Like when you start adding compression and things, because it's bringing up the quieter parts, one of the problems and the artifacts of using compression is that you're also bringing up what we call the floor noise, or the noise of the things around you. Because if a compressor is bringing up the quieter parts of your microphone, that means all those little things that maybe you don't want in your audio suddenly get turned up with it too. The sound of the AC in the background, the sound of the refrigerator running, the sound of a fan you have off on the side, those little things, the sound of traffic outside suddenly gets a little bit louder because it brings those up. But there's something you can do there too. There's another thing called a noise gate. And a noise gate basically says, hey, when there's not a really strong signal coming through, we're going to basically mute your track. So it literally is, they call it a gate because it works like a gate. Like, there's someone talking, let's open the gate, let's hear it. But the minute they stop talking, it closes the gate and doesn't let signal through. And that's really important, because where you usually hear the most background noise is when you stop talking. So one of the things you can do is add in, let me show you this one. It's a noise gate. And I've got that in here too. It's called this REA gate that's built in. And all this is I'm telling it, open and close based on when I'm not talking, and you can set the attack and the hold and the gain. I can go all day long with it, but basically you're saying how quickly do you want this thing, the gate, to open or close, and then once the person's open, and how quickly do you want it to close afterwards when they're done talking. So attack, hold, and release, these three are really the majority of it. Pre-open is sort of like guessing ahead of time of, like, you don't want it to sound really harsh, like you're trying to get it like feel like it's just opening smoothly and closing back down. So a lot of times when I'm using these other effects, let me put this on.
Right now you're listening to the Boya BY-M1 lavalier lapel mic directly into my...
Let me see if I can, let me stretch this out. I bet you I have some, you'll see it if I do this. If I stretch this, I bet you have some quieter parts. Oh, perfect. See this part right here? That's where I wasn't talking. So when you get to that quiet part, listen here. If you have headphones, you'll hear it more. How much background noise I pick up here.
Directly into my system.
You hear all that? Can you hear? I don't know if you can, but there's like this. I can hear all kinds of other noises going on. When I don't have the effects on, if I turn the effects off, the mic doesn't pick it up quite as much.
Directly into my system.
Little bit of noise. But when I turn on the effects, watch, the noise will get louder.
Directly into my system.
Just got louder. So that turning on the effects and turning on the compression brought up some of that background noise, and you're like, well, it helped the sound of this thing, but now I've got more floor noise. I've got more background noise. But what you can do here is you can put in a noise gate. And what you usually do is I try to work around a specific signal here, and I'll say, let me add a noise gate. Let me put it down here where you can see it. So right up here in the upper left, I'm sorry, where I start talking and then it gets quiet, this is all just floor noise. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set the gate to close around that floor noise.
Directly into my system.
You hear it close? Oh, let me do this. Let me loop this section. I can loop this section so it just keeps playing over the quiet part. Let me do that. Okay, now
System.
So this is no noise gate. Let's turn it on. You can actually hear it because I've caught the end of my line, so the gate is opening right there.
My system.
Closed. That's it closed.
My system.
Closed. Now, if I turn it off, you'll hear all that noise. If you
My
have
system.
Noise. Yuck. If you have headphones on, you can really hear this.
My system.
Noise gate. So that's one of those things that's really helpful too. Having that noise gate means, okay, well, I've done all this EQ and compression, but I'm hearing some floor noise, so putting in a noise gate just means you set it to how strong it is. And you can see that fader here with the RE gate, this big fader right here, is I've set the attack and hold, but what I'm really doing is I'm watching, let me do a lump here.
My system.
Here's the
M1
signal.
lavalier lapel mic.
Those green lines, anytime that green line falls below this fader right here, it'll close the gate. So that's setting that threshold. And I just set it so that, okay, I can close down that background noise. So when you hear me talking, pretty good, and it should quietly close down.
Lavalier lapel mic directly into my system.
Closed. See? So little things like that can make all the difference. EQ, compression, noise gate, a de-esser, simple stuff. And especially, most of all, when you have all these different things running, making sure, let me shrink this down so I can see a little bit more. Oh, I think I can anyway. Can I? Yeah, I think so. That's very big today. This is the biggest one I've ever seen. There we go. Hold on a second. This one's getting really big today. What is going on here? Why are you so big? Why are you so big? There we go. So when you're looking at this one here, looking at this, oh, because you won't be able to see the whole thing. That's why. Once I add all those things in, I'm paying attention to the spectrum analyzer.
One lavalier lapel mic
to see what's
directly into my system.
Let me get
my M1 lavalier lapel mic. My M1 lavalier tends to have less bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size.
See how much smoother this is?
But it also does a really good job of capturing your voice because it's right up close to your mouth and somewhat discreet in shot. You can even hide the wire down inside of your shirt. Right now you're listening to this microphone.
So that's all I was doing there, was adding a little EQ, a little compression. It's not perfect. Certainly if I was really going to put this out as like a podcast, I saw some of the low frequencies start to pop when I was playing with the wire when I was actually making the video. I played with the wire and I saw some of the super lows start to bubble up, so I'd probably cut those even heavier. But it starts rounding that out, and it's just real simple. You just got to think of, listen, there's an EQ curve. Understand that the human vocal should go not a lot of lows, so I'm going to try to put my hand the right way. Not a lot of lows, so those should be down. Then we get near the low mids and the upper mids. That's where the human voice lives. And then in those super high ones, the sibilance ones, not so much. So that should roll back off. So we're trying to build that nice rainbow kind of curve and then tweak it a bit, listening a bit, trying to get it to compress. We don't want to have certain things spiking all over the place. So squashing it in, balancing it, using things like a noise gate to close down some of the floor noise, a de-esser to control some of the super highs. And as you can see, a simple microphone like this that doesn't really sound like much. Again, this is unprocessed. Tends to have less bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size. Flat.
But it also does a really good job of
and then let's turn on the processing.
It's right up close to your mouth and somewhat discreet in shot. You can even hide the wire down inside of your shirt. Right now you're listening to this microphone directly into my system, so it sounds a little bit flat. But with a little bit of EQ and compression, it actually cleans up to a fairly rich vocal tone.
That's it. And that's literally what you want to start doing. Now, I know you guys are going to have some questions, and some of these are going to be tricky to answer, but I'll try to take some here. Is any of this possible with basic editing skills and software? Basic editing skills and software, basic editing skills, yes. Basic editing software, no. A lot of you guys know that I use Filmora, which is a fairly basic editor, and the only thing it really has is EQ. period. No compression, no noise gating. It doesn't have those higher end features, which is why I take all of my audio. I record it separately through a different mic. I don't even record into my camera. When I'm here in my studio, I actually film, and then I record my audio directly into Reaper. Like whatever mic, plug it right into Reaper. So I'm filming and I have my computer recording my audio. So my camera's also recording from the inboard audio on the camera. And then when I bring it into like Filmora, after I process the better audio, then I'll just mute the quieter audio so that I get the good audio I want. I just line it up. At the beginning of filming, I clap. It makes an audio spike, and then I just watch and go, okay, where my hands come together on those 3 claps, those 3 spikes, I line it up. That syncs my audio. And then I use the better audio, and I just mute the audio from the camera in Filmora. So stuff like DaVinci Resolve has a slightly better audio processing section. Adobe Premiere Pro has a better processing section, and you can use these VST plugins in DaVinci. I think Final Cut Pro has some capabilities as well, which are a little bit better. But most of the basic stuff, now you're much better off learning audio production. Learn a little audio processing, because like sometimes people will go, oh, I use Audacity. Audacity's great for simple stuff, but you don't have anywhere near the kind of control you do with something like Reaper. And you can start using Reaper today for free. I'd say learn the good stuff. Don't mess around. Like it's like the difference between spending all your time trying to make videos with a webcam as opposed to going, well, you've got that really great camera right there. You've got a mirrorless, 4K camera right there. Why don't you learn to use it? And people go, oh, it's too hard. I think one of the things I'm hoping to do here today is to simplify it for you, to show you, download it, getting running, and then you're just bringing your audio in and you're slowly stacking different effects, basic ones, EQ, compression, a noise gate, a de-esser, using a spectrum analyzer to look at it, to visualize what that audio looks like. One of the things I said earlier was what you listen through. Now, when I'm in my studio here, sometimes I'll use headphones, but I don't love them. Like these are decent. These are the DT770 Pros that are biodynamic. They're fairly flat in terms of the sound quality. If you don't know what I'm talking about, a lot of times people will go like, oh, I mix my audio using like really high, like AirPods, or they're using like, I have like some really good Sony headphones that are, like great, really rich sounding headphones. The problem is you don't want to mix on headphones like that, because what happens is it colors the sound. And what I mean by that, please, everyone pay attention here. In the studio right now, I have a bunch of blue lights on. If I stood right under those blue lights and took out 2 pieces of paper that both had different blue colors on them and said, which blue do you think works better, in your studio? Like which is a better one if you're going to have to pick a color for paint or something? I would say, well, it's hard for me to tell because the blue lights are actually influencing what they look like. I have to get them out in the daylight where I can actually see them. Like, let me get them. The lighting around me is coloring what I'm looking at. It's influencing how it looks. The same is true with headphones and speakers. They can have extra treble, extra bass, not enough bass, so your speakers might be small and have not much bass in them. And what you start doing is you start dialing up the bass thinking your audio needs that, when in fact it doesn't. That's just the speakers not giving you enough bass back in response. That's where like the spectrum analyzer, that V-span, can show you those things. In here, you can see one of them up here. I have 2 speakers mounted. These are actual studio near field reference monitors. You buy them specifically for mixing audio like you would in a recording studio. And they're designed to be flat sounding. They don't add a lot of bass or a lot of treble. They're designed to be fairly close to me because they're called near field reference monitors. I spread them out. They're in a very specific location. So where I sit, I get a direct stereo spot. They both come in and catch me. I'm dead center of the stereo pan. So make sure that what you're mixing through is something that's uncolored and as flat as possible. The spectrum analyzer can help, but you'll always be like wondering, like, well, why does this still sound not so great when I hear it on YouTube? It's because you're mixing it based on something that's colored and influencing what you're hearing and making decisions on. So always try to find either a decent set of flat headphones, but I prefer for the price of some of these more expensive, flatter headphones, because you can't always make noise. I know sometimes we're all in different studios and like you have family and you have to do it in headphones. Either get a flatter studio designed headphone that aren't super bassy. Don't be grabbing the Beats collection, Dr. Dre headphones and putting them on. You'll be like, yeah, this sounds great. Then you hear it later and it's like, wow, there's no low end in my mix. Well, that's because your headphones you were listening to were adding a lot of low end and you subtracted it in the mix. Not you thought it was there, but it was the headphones telling you that. So having something flat to listen to, super important. Great referencing system, and there's a lot of really affordable ones. So spending the time to get either a decent set of flat headphones or a good set of near-field reference monitors absolutely will be worth it all day long. Question, is the way to reduce or remove buzzing from wireless mic, or do I need a better one? A wireless mic. You probably need a better one. Buzzing is tough because you can noise gate, you can do a frequency suppression where there's actually some plugins that will analyze the, like remember how I was doing the quiet part? I won't get too deep into it, but that quiet part I was showing you here on that very first track, this floor noise, this whole section right here where I wasn't talking, there are plugins that you can add into your signal chain, and just where you're not talking, where there's just nothing happening, but any kind of buzz or thing that might be happening from the mic, it can analyze that. You click a button and it'll remove that, as much of that by EQing it out as possible. Now, it'll help, but the problem there is that whatever it pulls out may have been EQ frequencies that were helping the tone of your voice. So you're doing subtractive EQ to solve problems, which is one way to do it, but the best way to do it is solve the problem before you get into production. Because if you can get a better lav mic, if you get a better sounding lav mic, learn the way to process them properly, that'll do it. You don't want to have mics that have a lot of buzzing and humming. That's a problem that you'll be constantly fighting. The same way you don't want to be using a camera that's really fuzzy and out of focus. It's like, well, how do I get it in focus? Well, what you really wanted, the ingredients of what you're working with to start with should be better. And I can tell you, there's different ways to do it. That Boya BYM one is a pretty good, right off the bat, $20 mic for people, but it has a very long cable. So it can go really far away when you plug it in. Now, some people don't want to be plugged in. One of the questions someone had asked me earlier, before I even started, said like, well, I always get the cables get tangled and that becomes problematic. One of the things that we do a lot on the go is, I don't know if you guys have seen these. These are like the Rode Wireless Go's. Let me see if I can hold these up. You can see them. There we go. Oh, I can't keep them straight. Product placement. None of this is not a sponsor. Come on now. There you go. Now they're both upside down, just the way I wanted them. One is a transmitter and one is a receiver. So you can literally take one of these and let's say you can plug it into your phone or you can plug it into your camera. That would be this one. You basically turn them both on and it's a wireless transmitter and receiver, and it's got a little plug, and you just plug it into your phone or your camera and you put it next to that, and your phone or your camera can be far away. And then this one is actually the transmitter, and it actually has a microphone built in, and you could put it here and use it as that. But I got to be honest with you, I don't like the sound of these because of the way they're built and they're flat. They tend to not sound as great off axis because it is an omnidirectional mic, but just the way it's built, it points. Can you see? It points in a very specific direction too much. Let me see if you can see that mic port. That little center section is the actual mic. So if it's turned kind of down, the unit itself blocks it. But what's great about these is they have an input. You can get like a $9 lavalier mic, clip this onto your shirt, take the transmitter, clip it onto your belt. Now the only wire is on you, right? And it transmits back to the camera or the phone. So you can, and these are a couple $100, and they sell them as a Rode Wireless Go 2 Unit 2 that has two transmitters that go to a single receiver. So if you were sitting with another person and you both had cheap lavalier mics that you can make sound great, clip them, you each have a transmitter and it sends both right into your camera. So now you have two signals going into one, no wires anywhere. These are some of my favorite for when we're traveling a lot, or sometimes like Megan, you'll hear she'll be in the live streams with us, and all I'll do is I'll just put a lapel mic on her, put it through a Rode Wireless Go, and I'll have the other one plugged into my system over here. Then all I'll be is like, okay, I'll just plug you the other end in here, and I'll turn you up so we don't have any wires going from her desk to my desk, just all wirelessly sent to me, and it makes it super simple. With it being a phone, I bet that's likely a poke right. Yeah, there's a lot of things you're going to find that certain Certain phones will make noise. Certain systems will make noise. If you're doing it on a phone, you make sure it's compatible. Android can be weird. The cords can be weird. It can be a lot of different things. So, individual systems, phones, cameras, things like that will have their own idiosyncrasies. So just try to learn, do a little research before you do anything, make any decisions. Don't always think it's the mic. Do a little research before. Can I use a lavalier mic with my Samsung Galaxy S49, whatever the new one is? Because some of them have had problems over the years where some work great and some don't. What's the difference between mono and stereo? Simple. When you put headphones on, that's stereo. That means you have two sides. You have a left and you have a right? Left and right. A stereo signal is one that is understanding that there's a left and a right. Meaning, if you ever listen to some old Beatles songs or some different music, sometimes you'll hear, I can hear the guitar solos more in my left ear, and the piano or something is more in my right ear, and you'll hear it in headphones like, that's like it sounds rich. It sounds like this is over there more and that's over there more. That's stereo, right? That's you can have one signal that occupies that. And where that happens a lot is places like reverb. When you put reverb on a vocal and you want it to sound echoey, that means the signal has to go left and right at the same time. One signal, but left and right at the same time. Mono is dead up the middle. Think of it as no left and right, just one single signal that splits both. It's in both ears, but it's mono. And if you turn it to the left, it goes to the left. If you turn it to the right, it goes to the right. And that's it. Mono, no stereo spread. Back in the day when I was a kid, there used to be like everything was AM radio was mono. We used to ride around with these they were called transistor radios that would have like a little earpiece, and it was a little radio with a single speaker, one speaker, mono. The sound just came out. All older music back in the day, Elvis Presley years, was mono. Everything used to be designed to come out of one speaker, so they didn't think stereo. Why would they think stereo? It's like there's music and there's the speaker, you listen to it. One speaker. As the world developed, people started realizing, hey, if we can figure out a way to do two speakers, then you can have one piece of music playing, but some stuff can be more over to the left and some stuff can be more over to the right, and it can sound huge. It can sound crazy. So they started designing stereo recording, which allowed one individual track to be able to tell the system, send this more to the left, send this more to the right. That's the difference between mono and stereo. Hey, Daniel, thank you for your detailed reply the other day. Do you have any preference between Rode Wireless Go and the DJI wireless ones? I hear they're both good. I got to be honest with you. I've only used the DJI wireless ones once or twice. I don't own them, but I do own many of the Rode Wireless Goes, and I've liked the Rode Wireless Goes because they work. So a couple people have told me they had issues with connection sometimes on the DJI, but I think effectively they're both very good. I think they're both pretty solid wireless units. I like the Rode because I've used them, and in practice, I've never had them go down. They connect well. They do what they're supposed to do, and they're easy. They have a pretty good distance and range, and I can plug a cheap lapel mic into it. That's so I can get that discreet real easily. And I think the DJI do the same too. And I think they're pretty close in price point. So it's really, you're kind of splitting hairs. Whichever one seems to be the one that works for you. They're very similar. They're both very good. Let's see. Any mic could remove nasal sound. Yeah, like nasal sound tends to be needs a frequency thing. So what you really want to think about is not so much that a mic, like this particular mic tends to be less mid-range. This is a Shure SM7B. So this one tends to be a little scooped. Meaning if you looked at that rainbow curve we're talking about, just flat, this one has kind of those like up and like that. It has like a dip in the middle. So the bottom's a little heavier. It loses some of the mid-range. Has a little more fullness to it. But that's why I like this one for live streaming. It's a little richer. So what I would do is for a nasal sound is either you can dial that out with an EQ sweep. When you use your EQ, just look at the spectrum analyzer like I told you before when we were looking at that. Don't think about always the mic. Try to find a mic that has a good one that sounds pretty decent to you, a decent frequency response. And then when you record, just look at what's happening with my spectrum analyzer? Is this doing what I want it to do? Is Is it actually, what's the frequencies that are popping?
Bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule
size. If there's a lot in here,
but it also does a really good job of capturing your voice because it's right up close to your mouth and somewhat discreet.
So think about that. Just find the EQ, get in there and dial. If it sounds a little nasally, just kind of, that's the mid-range. It's usually that nasally mid or mid-high. You know, dial those out, find that frequency and roll it out a little bit. I do that a lot. You can do subtractive EQ. So if you have a microphone and you go, there is a problem, there's a frequency in here that I don't like, that I can't quite figure out, there's a cool way to figure that one out, Melody. Let me see if I can show you this. And it's by using the sweepable parametric EQ. What you do is you crank up where you think it is, go into the EQ, crank that up, locate the frequency when it's clearly obnoxious, and then reverse it, then dial it out. So it's almost like putting a spotlight on what you think the bad frequency is, and then removing it. This could get annoying right here. I'll show you what I mean, but it's a little audio annoying because I'm going to crank a frequency that you probably won't like. But let me do this. Let me pull this up. Let me pull this up here. Let me go over here. And let me show you what I mean. So let's say not this one, but let's use the boot EQ. So here's the boot EQ. And let's say here's a frequency right here that I found to be problematic. I don't know if you can see this really, really well. It's not going to get any bigger. It doesn't let me get larger, it just stretches that. But when we talked about it, this higher yellowy ones are your high frequencies. These orange ones are your high mid-highs. The red ones are your mid-lows, and then the blue ones are your lows. So if you can see, I've got this set for the frequency. I've got it set for the lowest 40, and I've got this totally subtracted. I'm like, get all of that out of there. I want to lose that bottom end because those are frequencies I don't want in there. But here on this mid-high, I was trying to get the tone, and let me see if you can hear this or not. I'll see if it works. Let me turn that off. I'll play it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to crank the volume of this frequency, and it'll sound, and then I'll sweep the frequency with that crank to see if I can find which one is wrong. And you'll hear it when you go, ooh, that sounds worse when you're there. That's a problem frequency. Let me see if this makes sense to you.
Bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size, but it also does a really good job of capturing your voice because it's right up close to your mouth and somewhat discreet in shot. You can even hide the wire down inside of your shirt.
Let's remove that.
Right now you're listening to this microphone directly into my system, so it sounds a little bit...
What I did there was I cranked up the volume and then I swept the mid-highs to go, which one of these frequencies is annoying to me? And when I did that, I was able to locate it, then do the opposite and remove it. Because straight up and down on this would be adding nothing and subtracting nothing. So I added as much as I could just to hear it. Right?
Bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size.
Right there.
But it also does a really good job of capturing.
That's like, ooh, that's a real annoying tone in my voice, that frequency. So let me go back and let me try dialing that out just a little bit. And it smooths out.
Bottom end than some of the other mics because of the capsule size. But it also does a really good job.
Does that make sense? That's just sweeping to find the problem. I just swept the range of frequencies in the mid-highs. You can do that in the lows. You can do that in the mid-lows. Is what you do is you crank up the volume of that part of the spectrum on your EQ, and then just sweep and go. So you're basically, it's moving the center point of that frequencies in the mid-highs, and you go, oh, that's, when you hear it loud, sometimes it's easier to notice like, ooh, that's kind of annoying. And once you locate that high point, you go, that's it. Then just do subtractive EQ. One thing I would tell you is don't do any really super harsh sweeps. You don't want to do like huge subtractive EQ, unless it's like the ultra lows, you're just rolling off all the bass, like the low frequencies in your voice so it doesn't rumble. Things that your voice shouldn't even be occupying those spaces at all. Those are usually like a low pass or a high pass filter. But what you want to do in general is use slight sweeps, like reduce, subtract a dB or two of a certain thing, add a dB or two of a certain thing. You don't want to be adding like 6 dB of certain frequencies because it's unnatural. And if that's the problem, then it's your mic. It's not the processing. If a mic can't get even close to a reasonably flat signal, and I'm using a $20 Boya for this example, and it sounds it's pretty close right off the bat. It's just trying to tweaking it, making it sweeter. My issue is, let's see, Sessenach Dragon. My issue is plosives due to the microphone picking up my saliva sounds. I've got a Rode Lav with a wireless Go. I know about dehydration, but I can't seem to rehydrate sufficiently. One of the things I would tell you is you'll notice right here when I'm talking, plosives are because you're too close to the p. That's too close. So that's probably bound, that's what plosives come from. Plosives are the air hitting the capsule. So in your case, tape the mic to your chest or tape the mic to the inside of your shirt, because what it's picking up is it's too close. It's catching too much. Go inside your shirt, tape it to your chest, tape it right over. Then you can even kind of go a little bit over the capsule a bit. Just make sure it's just covered. Then put your shirt back over it. And that can solve a lot of those issues, because your shirt acts a bit like a filter, and it's sort of gives you a little bit of distance from the mic. Not that it's a lot farther away, but it pulls away some of that immediate grab. So be careful with that. That's one of the easiest things to do. Hydrating is good, but if you've got learning to EQ, I bet you don't spend a lot of time EQ, compressing, pulling out frequencies that are problematic. Learn what we just talked about here today, and that can change a lot of those plosives things. Plosives are usually not spits. Plosives are air hitting that microphone. The thing you're talking about is you're getting too much of the high stuff hitting in there. De-esser can help. Some of the clickety saliva, the high things, those are super high frequencies. So de-esser will take a lot of that out too. So learning how to properly place your mic, learning how to use EQ and compression, learning how to use things like a de-esser, those can be hugely, hugely helpful for controlling your sound. Looks like we got one here from the KMH family. Thanks, Daniel, for always dropping gems. If we are starting to outsource our video, if we are starting to outsource our video editing, what would you recommend some basic things to ask our editor to check regards the audio in our video? I would, if you're going to outsource it, I'd say, listen, I'm going to give you the flat audio. Don't color it at all. Give them the right from the mic source audio and see what they do. And ask them, what do you do? What do you use for audio processing? Can you try sending them an example of just your audio and go, this is the mics, like do a test thing. Go film 60 seconds and go, here's us talking into our mics. This is what we're doing. Here it is. Test, give us say all the things you can possibly say, she sells seashells by the seashore. Try to get things that, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, talk. Send it to them and go, do me a favor. I just want to see, can you send that back to me color corrected and with the audio improved? I want to see how it sounds. Then you can, you'll have an example of what they plan on doing on like a 60-second clip. It's not asking a lot. If you're going to be outsourcing, that's the least someone should be able to do is color correct and audio and process your audio and have them give it back to you. And you can compare the original to what they've given you, and you can make decisions if that editor is the right one for you. Because a good editor should be able to get your audio sounding pretty good and get your video sounding good, assuming you're sending them some decent ingredients to work with. That's a big part of it. Don't expect an editor to create miracles, but with the stuff going on today, a decent lapel mic put in the right place. Like I showed you, all you got to do is, all I had mine was clipped to my chest and it can sound great. So have them do that. I think that would be the first thing I'd ask for. Let's see, what are we going on here? Maybe we should, maybe we should or source to Daniel. Can I join the family? Was I just entered into the family? That might work. You're dropping gold. Oh God, I'm glad this is helpful, Justin. I know this is very niche stuff, but I think what happens a lot, Justin, is people just record their audio and they go, I'm done. I use the mic. If it doesn't sound good, it must be the mic. And I don't think people always realize, listen, the tone of my voice, I'm a loud speaker. Anyone who's been in a room with me before knows I have a fairly loud voice. So it's easy for me to have mics get plosives and do things and sound funny. When Megan gets on the same microphone, she's like super quiet. And the mic sounds totally different because she's got a quieter voice. She's got a different tone to her voice. So the tonality of our voice means we have to learn how to use, one, get a decent mic, but even a cheap mic, a cheap lav mic can do it. They're built to handle a lot of different style of vocal tonality, but learning how to then take that audio and process it, right? If you ever watch Peter McKinnon, he doesn't just take a picture and go, there you go, put it on Instagram. He spends all kinds of time in Adobe Photoshop and color correcting it. Not only does he spend a lot of time getting the shot right so that the ingredients are right, but then he's color correcting and he's color grading and he's doing all these things to really make it pop. That's the same thing you should be doing with your audio, is learning how to improve the quality of it. So when people hear it on YouTube, it's like, wow, that sounds really good. It should never be distracting. You don't want your audio to be like, ooh, that's a pretty good video, but the audio is tough. There's a lot of background noise, or it's harsh and it's abrasive. Audio is equally as important as video, by far. Let's see. I just record and go. Sometimes I might add voice enhancement, and that's it. Yeah, that's the thing. I think, you know, as you learn more about YouTube and video editing and all those things, I think the ability to understand how to improve your audio. That's why people start buying slightly better mics, slightly better equipment to work. That's why today I'm showing you all free stuff that you can download. That's super important to learn how to improve. We're always trying to improve. We all start like that, just record. There are people out there who just grab their phones and they let the phone mic do all the work for them. But they find over time, boy, I found if I use a lapel mic and a wireless and then I use my phone, it actually sounds better. We all learn to improve. I got to take a quick second here to thank the wonderful sponsors who allow me to do this show every single week.
This live stream is sponsored in part by StreamYard, live streaming made simple, and by Spreadshop, the #1 resource for all of your print-on-demand needs.
So if you're interested in doing live streams that look something like this and making the kind of merch that you can start selling, wearing in your own streams too, click on the links down in the description below. You can try all of this stuff for free. That's what I love. Free is the best way to do anything. I think we've covered most of the things in here. If you have any questions, come back and drop them into the comments section afterwards. I will be linking another video too where it was a little bit older, where I actually showed exactly how to download the stuff we used here today, exactly how to install it into your system, exactly how to make sure it's up and running properly. But go grab that stuff that I've got linked down below. Start trying it out on your desktop. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to improve your audio, so you don't have to spend a lot more money on mics. You can just start learning how to process it better. And I want to thank all you guys for hanging around today and asking some great questions and tolerating my silliness as I bounce in and out of the thing that I do. And we will catch you next time.